One of the situations I come across regularly in relation to marriage or relationship breakdown, what happens, what are the options? And generally we have to talk to clients, generally we have to talk to clients about separation or divorce. But fundamentally, one of the most important things to recognize is that when the relationship breaks down, the parties are going to be living in a very difficult situation. The atmosphere in the house is going to be probably very, very poor, and it'll be a trying time for both parties. It may be the case that one party recognises that the relationship is over and the other party is less inclined to agree, but sooner or later they may come around to agree. But the bottom line is, what's open to the parties then is a separation agreement, which is a deed of separation, a private contract, as it were, between the parties, or a divorce if they qualified for it. But the difficult thing is this, and this is one of the saddest situations that I see regularly, and that is, there's a nice barge there down the canal here in Enfield. It's actually the 4th of July 2025. The cyclists coming down there now. But one of the saddest situations is the fact that even though the parties might agree, Jesus, a tree fell down on top of that barge there. Must have been overnight. See the tree there? We'll zoom in there now. Anyway, you see the tree down there on that barge. That's very unfortunate. It must have blown down last night. God, there's probably a bit of damage done to it there as well, actually. So you can explain to the parties that it's in their best interest, perhaps the best interest of the child or children, that they either separate, enter into a deed of separation, a legal agreement, a legal separation agreement. They could go to a mediator and have a mediator help them arrive at various terms, which ultimately will form a separation agreement which they can get independent legal advice about. Or if they are entitled to apply for a divorce, that is, they've lived apart for 2 out of the previous 3 years, and living apart from a divorce perspective involves, you could be living under the same roof. So if you weren't sharing a same bed, same bedroom, you had separate lives essentially, maybe eating your own meals and so on. Courts can accept that a couple is living apart for the requisite period of time. And obviously if the couple themselves then agree that they've lived apart, as it were, for 2 out of the previous 3 years, they're entitled to a divorce. But the problem is, and the big problem I see often, very, very often, and which leads to situations of lives of quiet desperation, is where the couple are stuck with one another. They're stuck with one another because they cannot afford financially to move out and live separately. In other words, they have one house, they either have negative equity or very little equity in the house. There's a bank involved, and with the best will in the world, they are looking to go from a situation where they have one house to a situation where there's going to be 2 households. Either he moves out or she moves out. Either way, if they're going to buy another property or rent another property, you're looking at significant costs, and that can be a real problem. And that can lead to a situation where people are literally living lives of quiet desperation, maybe not so quiet desperation, in the house with another person. They both recognise that the relationship is over, and yet they're stuck with one another simply because they cannot afford to live apart. They cannot afford to have one of them moving out and setting up a new home, either buying a new home, buying a new property, or renting a property. And between the rental accommodation shortage, the housing supply shortage, and the money supply problem, it's a very, very sad situation. And even if the parties are sensible and mature and they recognise the writing on the wall, they recognise that the marriage is over, they recognise that the relationship is over, they're stuck with one another. They are literally stuck with one another, like a log tied together going down a stream. I know that might sound a bit extreme or whatever, but when you're living together in a family home for a number of years in a marriage, and there's a rupture or a breakdown, and then you have to look at setting up a second home. If you just have ordinary working jobs and you have a mortgage, big mortgage on your house, and there isn't much equity there, it's going to be bloody impossible or very difficult to set up again. Now, I have come across plenty of people who are in the fortunate situation where they can actually afford to move out. They may already have more than one property, or they may have the resources to get another property, or they may have the resources, good jobs, etc., to get another mortgage, and one person will take over the mortgage, perhaps on the family home, and the other person will transfer their interest to the person who's staying, and there'll be a payment of money in recognition, and the second person can move on. But very often I'm aware of many, many couples in this very difficult situation where they're literally living together in a house where their relationship is over. They can't afford to go anywhere else. They're literally stuck with one another, and it must be an appalling, unpleasant environment. But that's one of the problems we come across regularly. But the way for a couple when their relationship breaks down is mediation, separation, divorce generally. And obviously we would encourage people to be mature and sensible and recognise if the relationship is over, the best thing to do is to come to an agreement as to how they're going to organise their affairs going forward. And that nearly always involves the couple living separately, separate and apart. So that's key. Anyway, I hope you find the video useful. Just down the canal here in Enfield now today. It's the 4th of July 2025. This is the harbour area, I think. Yes, Enfield Harbour, down the canal, the Royal Canal in Enfield, County Meath. It's a bit dull today. That poor guy up there now with his barge and the tree after falling across it. That's unfortunate. And I see he has a big piece of tarpaulin over the top. The tree must have done some damage to the structure of the boat and perhaps knocked in what passes for the roof in the boat. Very unfortunate, and you wouldn't expect falling trees in July, but that's what you have with the Irish weather. Must have a look at it up here now. Yeah, let's take a look here now and just see how bad this is. If you look at the back of the boat there now, you'll see. Let's swing this around now. You'll see there on the right hand side where on the right hand side there you see that tarpaulin. That tree must have fallen down and done some damage to the structure of the boat. The tree is still there. That's it. Unfortunate for some poor devil with his home there on the canal. Maybe it's not his home, maybe it's just a leisure thing. Maybe. Anyway, that's unfortunate. That's, nice boats down the canal here. There's another one there now. They say that guy was thanking his lucky stars that he didn't get a tree. And Jesus, this one has a tree down on it as well, or branches going across it anyway. Another one up here then as well. This is normally down in the harbour. this one, Endeavour. Anyway, if you liked the video, you might give the old thumbs up down below there, and you might be interested in subscribing to my YouTube channel. Hiya.